He ran the most feared criminal organization in Seoul, survived 2 assassination attempts, and never once flinched at a loaded gun pointed at his chest. Yet the sight of a cold cloth pressed against his 7-year-old son's burned forearm made Jang Min-jun's entire empire feel like it was built on paper. The night the rain came to Seoul, it came without apology. It didn't drizzle. It didn't ease in politely the way weather sometimes does when it understands it is interrupting something. It arrived all at once, heavy, theatrical, the kind of rain that sounds like the sky has been holding something back for months and has finally, violently, decided to let it go. It hammered the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 47th floor penthouse at Jang Tower and streaked the glass like something desperate trying to get in. Or perhaps like something trying to get out. Jang Min-jun stood at the window with a glass of scotch he hadn't touched, watching the city below dissolve into blurred neon and running color. Seoul at night, from this height, looked like a painting left in the rain, beautiful, bleeding at the edges, slowly becoming something unrecognizable. He was 42 years old. He had more money than 3 generations of his family could responsibly spend. He controlled shipping routes that moved more cargo, legitimate and otherwise, than most mid-sized governments. His name, spoken in certain rooms, produced a particular quality of silence. Not reverence. Something older and more useful than reverence. And yet, he had assembled IKEA furniture alone on a Sunday afternoon 14 months ago, following the divorce, and he had cried. Not because of the furniture, exactly, but because Park Soo-yeon had always been the one who read the instructions, and he hadn't understood until she was gone how many things in his life she had quietly been holding together while he stood around looking imposing. That was the thing about losing the right person. You don't feel the full weight of it immediately. It comes later in the strangest places. In instruction manuals. In the silence on Sunday mornings. In the particular way your son looks at the door when it's time to go back to his mother, not with relief, exactly, but with something that looks uncomfortably close to it. Jae-woo was 7. Gap-toothed, serious-eyed, and possessed of the devastating habit of asking questions adults had no good answers to. He arrived every Friday at 6 and left every Sunday at 5, and in between those hours, Min-jun tried, genuinely, imperfectly, with the specific incompetence of a man who had mastered everything except the things that mattered most, to be a father. He thought he was doing reasonably well. He was not doing reasonably well. The penthouse had changed since Yuna moved in. Not dramatically, she wasn't foolish enough to make changes that announced themselves. She was subtle, which is a quality that, depending on how it's applied, is either a virtue or a weapon. In Yuna's case, it was both, deployed with the patience of a chess player who has already seen 6 moves ahead and is simply waiting for everyone else to catch up. She was 26. She had walked into the Blue Orchid Lounge in Gangnam on a Thursday in February, wearing a red dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary, and she had looked at Min-jun across a crowded room the way people look at something they have already decided to own. He had interpreted this as attraction. It was, in fact, reconnaissance. Within 3 months, she had a drawer in the penthouse. Within 4, she had 4 drawers, a dedicated shelf in the refrigerator, and an architectural print on the living room wall where Jae-woo's crayon drawing of a stegosaurus had previously hung. The stegosaurus had not been consulted about its removal. Neither had Jae-woo. Mrs. O, the housekeeper, 64, 4'11", constitutionally incapable of dishonesty, had watched all of this with the expression of a woman watching a slow-motion disaster she is not being permitted to prevent. She had told Min-jun plainly in the first week, "That one is theater." Min-jun had smiled and told her she was overreacting. Mrs. O had looked at him the way a doctor looks at a patient who insists the lump is nothing. She went back to the kitchen and said nothing further. She was patient. She had lived long enough to know that some people only believe in fire after they've been burnt. And in the living room of the 47th floor, on a Friday night with rain pressing against every window, a small boy named Jae-woo was pressing a cold cloth to his forearm, alone, deciding whether it was worth it to make a phone call. He decided it was. He pressed 3 buttons. His mother answered on the second ring. 208 him. The elevator doors had not yet fully opened when Park Soo-yeon already knew. It wasn't the way the concierge had avoided her eyes when he waved her through without calling upstairs, though that was telling. It wasn't the particular quality of silence that greeted her as she stepped into the marble foyer of the 47th floor, though that was telling too. It was something older than observation. Something that lives in the chest cavity of every mother who has ever received a phone call that ends with, "Please come." She had been asleep when the phone rang. Or trying to be asleep, which is a different thing, the kind of horizontal consciousness that passes for rest when you are a divorced woman raising a child alone and running a legal consultancy and refusing, on principle, to let any of it show on your face during business hours. She had been in her bedroom in her apartment in Mapo, eyes closed, mind conducting its nightly audit of everything she hadn't finished and everyone she hadn't called back, when the small phone she kept charged on the nightstand, Jaiwoo's emergency line, the one with 3 pre-programmed numbers, had lit up the ceiling. She had not wasted time on shoes with laces. She had not wasted time at all. Now she stood in the elevator doorway of a penthouse she had not entered in 14 months, wearing sneakers and a coat thrown over the oversized shirt she slept in, her hair unpinned and falling past her shoulders, and she looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had not come here to be looked at. She had come here for one reason, and that reason was sitting at the kitchen counter 40 feet away, holding a cloth to his arm, watching her with eyes that were trying very hard not to cry now that she had arrived, because children often hold it together through the scary part and fall apart precisely at the moment safety appears. She crossed the room. She did not look at Minjun, who stood near the hallway entrance in his full immaculate suit at nearly 11 o'clock at night, because Minjun was not why she was here. She did not look at Yuna, who had positioned herself near the window in the architectural way beautiful people position themselves when they are about to perform innocence for an audience. She looked only at her son. She knelt in front of him. She took his face in both hands first, not the arm, the face, because she understood that the burn was not the whole injury. She looked at him. Really looked. At the careful blankness he had constructed across his features. At the slight puffiness beneath his eyes that told her he had been crying for longer than 10 minutes before he called. At the way his small shoulders were sitting, drawn inward, protective, the posture of a child who has been making himself smaller for a while now. "Hey," she said. Quietly. Just that. His chin moved. One small tremor. "Show me," she said. He lifted the cloth. The burn was small. Medically, a nurse would have assessed it as minor. A superficial scald, perhaps 2 centimeters, already cooling. Medically, it would heal without a scar. Soo-yeon was not thinking medically. She placed the cloth back gently. She pressed her palm flat over it, over his hand, holding both. She breathed once, slowly, the way you breathe when you are choosing very carefully what you are about to do with what you are feeling. Then she stood, and the room changed. It is a particular kind of power that has nothing to do with volume or velocity. Minjun had the other kind, the kind that fills a room with pressure, that makes men recalculate their choices simply by walking in. It was considerable. She had always known it was considerable. She had also always known, though she would not have said it while they were married because she was not cruel, that it was fundamentally the easier kind. Intimidating people who are already afraid of you requires very little imagination. What Soo-yeon possessed was harder to acquire and impossible to fake. She turned to face the room and her expression was not anger. Anger is loud and therefore manageable. You can negotiate with anger, you can wait it out, you can perform contrition until it passes. What she wore instead was clarity. Total, surgical, immovable clarity. The kind that has already made its decision and is simply waiting for the universe to catch up. "Get your things, baby," she said to Jaiwoo. The same quiet tone. Completely steady. Yuna moved first. Not physically, she was too composed for that, but her face moved. Something shifted behind her eyes. A micro-recalculation. Minjun said Soo-yeon's name. It came out as two things simultaneously, a warning and a question, which meant it was effectively neither. She turned to him. Here was the man who had, 11 years ago, stood across a rooftop in Busan while 3 armed men surrounded him and had not blinked. Here was the man who had once told a government prosecutor, to his face, in a deposition room, "You're going to need a better theory." Here was Jang Minjun, who moved through the world with the specific gravity of someone who has never genuinely been told no by anything, including physics. She looked at him the way she always had, not up, not down. Directly. "You can call your lawyers in the morning," she said. "Tonight he comes with me. And if you are the man I once believed you were, you will not stop us." It was, by any measure, an extraordinary sentence. It gave him nothing to push against. It didn't accuse him. It didn't threaten him. It simply held up a mirror and asked him to decide, in real time, who he saw. Yuna opened her mouth. She had been constructing her account across the preceding 40 minutes. The timeline, the tone, the calibrated remorse. It was a good account. It was the kind of account that had probably worked before, in other rooms, with other people. "Don't," Soo-yeon said. One word. And the extraordinary thing, the thing Yuna would privately revisit for years, in the particular way we revisit moments in which we were genuinely outclassed, was that it wasn't loud. It wasn't threatening. It was simply final. The conversational equivalent of a door closing on a room that was never going to be opened again. Jai was slid off the kitchen stool. He picked up the small bag he had apparently already packed, because children who learn to make themselves small also learn to be ready, and he took his mother's hand. Minjun did not move. He stood in the center of his $4 million penthouse, in his perfect suit, in his building with his name on it, and he did not move. And if you had asked him afterward, in one of the rare moments he permitted honesty, he would have told you that he didn't move because she was right. Not just about tonight. About all of it. About every weekend Jaiwoo had arrived with that careful quietness. About Mrs. O's forward verdict he had dismissed in February. About the crayon stegosaurus that had disappeared from the refrigerator and the small boy who had never mentioned it. He had been managing a criminal empire with extraordinary precision. He had been managing his home with extraordinary negligence. The elevator closed. He stood in the silence they left behind, and for the first time in a very long time, Jang Minjun had absolutely no idea what to do next. "Can I ask you something?" At this point in the story, Yuna had every opportunity to tell the truth. To step up. To protect a child instead of herself. She chose otherwise every single time. If you've ever watched someone stay silent while a child was being hurt, you know how much that silence costs. Comment, protect every child, if you believe no child should ever be made to feel invisible in their own home. And if you can't stand people like Yuna, hit that subscribe button right now, because only people who think what she did was acceptable won't. The morning after is always quieter than the storm deserves. Soo-yeon's apartment in Mapo was not large. It was clean, warm, and filled with the specific personality of a woman who had rebuilt her life deliberately, bookshelves organized by subject, a kitchen that smelled of sesame and something always simmering, Jaiwa's artwork covering an entire wall the way galleries cover walls, except with considerably more heart and significantly more dinosaurs. She settled Jaiwoo into her bed that night. She sat beside him until his breathing slowed and the careful tension he carried in his small shoulders finally, reluctantly, released into sleep. She watched him the way mothers watch sleeping children after a scare, cataloging every feature, reaffirming presence, quietly furious in the way that only love can generate fury. Then she went to the kitchen, made tea she didn't drink, and sat with the silence. Her phone buzzed at 12:43 a.m. Minjun. She let it ring. It buzzed again at 1:07. Then 1:31. She did not answer any of them, not because she was being cruel, but because she understood something important, that whatever Minjun needed to process tonight, he needed to process without her managing it for him. She had spent 4 years of marriage quietly managing things for a man who never noticed they were being managed. She was not doing it again. She went to sleep. Jaiwo woke the next morning and ate 3 bowls of ramen, which Soo-yeon took as an encouraging sign. He was quiet at first, that particular morning after quiet of a child recalibrating, but by noon he had his dinosaur encyclopedia open on the floor and was explaining to her, with considerable authority, the difference between a Spinosaurus and a Baryonyx. She listened to every word. This was the thing Minjun had never understood about Soo-yeon. Not a flaw in him, exactly, more a limitation of the world he inhabited. He understood power. He understood leverage and consequence and the careful choreography of dangerous men. What he had never learned was the profound, load-bearing importance of simply listening to a 7-year-old explain dinosaurs on a Saturday morning. It was not nothing. It was, in fact, almost everything. Her phone buzzed again at 2 p.m. Not Minjun this time. Mrs. O. She answered immediately. She is gone, Mrs. O said, without preamble, because Mrs. O had never seen the point of preamble. I supervised personally. Every drawer. Every shelf print. Everything. Soo-yeon closed her eyes briefly. The Stegosaurus, she said. The paws. In the recycling bin. I retrieved it. Something loosened in Soo-yeon's chest. Thank you, Mrs. O. He is sitting in the living room, Mrs. O continued, her voice dropping a half register. In his suit. He has been sitting there since 6 this morning. He has not eaten. Soo-yeon said nothing. I thought you should know, Mrs. O said. Then, after a precise pause, he is not a bad man, that one. He is a foolish one. There is a difference. I know the difference, Soo-yeon said quietly. Yes, Mrs. O agreed. That is why I called you. She hung up without goodbye because that was also her way. Soo-yeon set the phone down on the counter. Jaiwo was still on the floor, still explaining something about prehistoric river ecosystems, still entirely trusting that his mother was listening. She was. But something Mrs. O had said was sitting with her now, quietly, stubbornly, the way true things tend to sit. He is not a bad man. He is a foolish one. The question was whether foolish men deserved second chances. She didn't have an answer yet. But she was, for the first time since last night, considering the question. Minjun had not changed his suit. This was, objectively, a strange detail to fixate on, and yet it was the first thing his Lieutenant Kong Tae-woong noticed when he arrived at the penthouse at 9 Saturday morning, summoned by a text that read simply, "Come." Tae-woong had worked for Minjun for 11 years. He had seen him in boardrooms and backrooms and once, memorably, in a Busan fish market conducting a negotiation that resulted in 3 men crying. He had never seen him sitting in a living room in yesterday's suit, doing nothing. Not reading. Not on the phone. Not reviewing the shipping manifests he carried everywhere like a second spine. Just sitting. Tae-woong set a coffee on the table in front of him and took the chair across the way men sit when they are trying to appear casual about the fact that they are deeply concerned. She took the boy, Minjun said. Not a complaint. A statement of fact, delivered the way a man delivers facts he is still assembling meaning around. I heard, Tae-woong said carefully. I let her. I know. Silence. Minjun picked up the coffee. Put it down without drinking it. Tae-woong, he said. Did you know? About the boy. Tae-woong was quiet for exactly 2 seconds too long. Minjun looked at him. We notice things, Tae-woong said finally. Small things. The way he was quiet when she was in the room. The way he stopped eating dinner at the table after she moved in. He paused. Mrs. O spoke to me in March. I told her to tell you directly. She told me, Minjun said. I told her she was overreacting. Yes, Tae-woong said, with the restraint of a man choosing diplomacy over honesty by the thinnest possible margin. Minjun stood. He walked to the window, the same window he had stood at last night while the rain performed its drama against the glass. The city below was sharp and clean this morning, The way Seoul always looks after heavy rain, like it has been briefly honest with itself. I have spent 11 years, he said, making sure that no one in this city could touch what is mine without consequence. Tae-woong waited. My own son, Min-jun said quietly. In my own house. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The unfinished sentence contained everything. The specific, devastating humiliation of a man who had protected empires and failed a child. It wasn't guilt exactly. It was something more structural than guilt. It was the moment a man realizes that the architecture he has spent his life constructing has a room in it he never inspected, and something terrible had been happening in that room while he stood outside it feeling competent. What do you need? Tae-woong asked. A lawyer, Min-jun said. Not mine. A good one. Family law. Tae-woong blinked. You're going to fight for custody? I'm going to do whatever Soo-yeon's lawyer tells me is fair, Min-jun said. And then I'm going to do more than that. Tae-woong stared at him. In 11 years he had watched this man negotiate from positions of absolute dominance. He had never once heard him volunteer disadvantage. Also, Min-jun added, find the Stegosaurus drawing. The one from the refrigerator. Mrs. O has it. Min-jun turned from the window. Something crossed his face, brief, unguarded, the expression of a man catching a glimpse of his own reflection in an unexpected surface. Of course she does, he said. He picked up his phone. Scrolled to Soo-yeon's name. Held it for a long moment. The way you hold something you are not sure you have earned the right to reach for. He put the phone down. Not yet. He understood, with a clarity that felt new and uncomfortable, that there was a sequence to this. That showing up now, empty-handed and contrite, was not enough. That Soo-yeon had watched him choose badly for long enough that words, even good ones, had lost most of their currency. He needed to do something. Something real. Something that cost him more than an apology. He just had to figure out what that looked like for a man who had always believed that the most important room in any building was the one at the top. He was beginning to understand it was the one where his son ate dinner. 3 weeks passed. Soo-yeon noticed the changes the way you notice weather shifting, not in one dramatic moment but in the accumulation of small signals that eventually become impossible to ignore. The first was the envelope. It arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by a courier she didn't recognize, addressed in handwriting she did. Inside was a single document, a voluntary amendment to their existing custody agreement, drafted by a family attorney she had never met, granting her full primary custody with expanded rights and reducing Min-jun's access to whatever schedule she deemed appropriate. No negotiation. No counteroffer. No asterisks. At the bottom, in Min-jun's handwriting, were 4 words. Whatever you decide. She read it twice. Set it on the kitchen counter. Made coffee. Read it a 3rd time. Then she called her own attorney, a sharp woman named Ji-hyun who had handled the original divorce with the precision of a surgeon and the patience of someone who had seen every variety of human foolishness and remained unshocked by all of it. He's offering full primary, Soo-yeon said. Ji-hyun was quiet for a moment. Voluntarily. No conditions. Another pause. Either he's genuinely remorseful, Ji-hyun said, or he's doing something very sophisticated. He's not sophisticated in this direction, Soo-yeon said. He's many things. Domestically sophisticated is not one of them. Then sign it, Ji-hyun said. And watch. The second change arrived Thursday. Jaewa came home from school carrying a package, small, wrapped in brown paper, his name written on the front in his father's handwriting. Inside was a book. A hardcover encyclopedia of prehistoric life, 3 centimeters thick, with a yellow sticky note on the cover that read, "For the dinosaur expert. Sorry I missed some weekends. I'm paying attention now. Appa." Jaewa read the note twice. Pressed it flat with his small palm. Then looked up at Soo-yeon with an expression she recognized. Cautious hope, the most fragile of all emotional states, the one that has been disappointed before and is trying to decide whether to try again. "Can I call him?" Jaiwoo asked. Yes, she said immediately, without hesitation. Because whatever her own complicated feelings about Minjun were, they lived in a completely separate country from Jaiwoo's relationship with his father, and she had always been disciplined about keeping the borders clear. She left the room while he called. She stood in the hallway and listened to her son laugh at something his father said, a real laugh, unguarded, the gap-toothed one that showed up when he forgot to be careful, and she leaned against the wall and breathed. The third change she heard about from Mrs. O, who called on a Friday evening with the energy of someone delivering intelligence they consider significant. Minjun had cleared Yuna's remaining items from storage personally. He had reinstated Jaiwoo's bedroom exactly as it had been before. Dinosaur posters, the specific blue nightlight, the shelf of ramen cups Jaiwoo insisted on keeping in his room for reasons no adult had successfully established. He had also, Mrs. O reported with audible satisfaction, put the Stegosaurus drawing back on the refrigerator. In the center, held with 4 magnets instead of the previous 2. He measured it, Mrs. O said, with an actual ruler, to make sure it was centered. Su Yun pressed her lips together against a smile she wasn't ready to fully permit yet. Mrs. O, she said, why are you telling me all of this? A pause, characteristic and deliberate. Because you are the only person, Mrs. O said, who ever made that man want to be better than he is. And because Jaiwoo deserves a father who is paying attention. Another pause. Also because I am 64 years old and I have been watching foolish men waste good women for 4 decades and I am very tired of it. Suyun laughed. A real one. Good night, Mrs. O. Good night, Mrs. O said. Think about it. She hung up. Su-Yun stood in her kitchen in the quiet of a Friday evening, the custody amendment still on the counter, her son's laughter still echoing from an hour ago, Mrs. O's words settling into the space between what she knew and what she hadn't yet decided. She picked up the amendment. This time, she reached for a pen. The meeting was Jaiwoo's idea. This was important to understand, not Minjun's orchestration, not Su-Yun's concession, not Mrs. O's considerable behind-the-scenes maneuvering, though that last one remained a permanent possibility. It was a 7-year-old boy who announced, on a Sunday morning over ramen, that he wanted his parents to have dinner together. Not a reunion. Not a grand gesture. Dinner. Just dinner, Jaiwoo said, with the matter-of-fact authority of someone who has considered this carefully and does not understand why the adults in the room are making it complicated. At the table. Together. Like normal. Su-Yun looked at her son. At the gap-toothed certainty on his face. At the way he was holding his chopsticks midair, waiting for an answer with the patience of someone who has learned to wait but has decided today is not a waiting day. I'll think about it, she said. You always say that, Jaiwoo said. Because I always mean it. Appa said yes already, Jaiwoo added, with the precision timing of a child who has been saving the decisive information for exactly the right moment. Su-Yun set down her spoon. Did he? She said. It was not a question. He said whatever you decide. Jaiwoo picked up his ramen again, satisfied. He says that a lot now. She chose neutral ground. A small Korean restaurant in Mapo, not Minjun's world, not a performance space, no private rooms or sommelier or any of the apparatus that surrounds powerful men when they want to impress. Formica tables. Fluorescent lighting that was honest about everyone's face. The kind of place where the food arrived fast and the portions were generous and nobody cared who you were. Minjun arrived first. She noticed this. That he was early, that he was seated at the table she had specified, that he was wearing a plain dark jacket with no tie, which for Jang Minjun was roughly the equivalent of arriving in pajamas. He had made a deliberate choice to take up less space. She noticed that too. Jaiwoo ran ahead of her and threw himself at his father with the full-bodied ramen-fueled enthusiasm of a child who has resolved his own feelings considerably faster than the adults around him. Minjun caught him. Held him. And for a moment, just a moment, the careful composure he carried like a second skeleton simply wasn't there. He looked, Suyun thought, like a man who had almost lost something and knew it. She sat down. The first 10 minutes were navigated with the specific careful politeness of two people who know each other profoundly and are choosing, for the evening, to let Jaiwoo set the tone. Jaiwoo, unburdened by subtext, set an excellent tone. He explained the complete dietary habits of the Spinosaurus. He demonstrated, using a chopstick, the approximate length of a Mosasaurus. He ate everything on his plate and negotiated a second order of tteokbokki with the confidence of someone who understands that dinner tables are places where reasonable requests are granted. Minjun granted every single one. When Jaiwoo excused himself to use the bathroom with the urgency that only children and national emergencies produce, the table went briefly quiet. Minjun looked at her. No performance in it. No calculated angle. I know an apology isn't a currency that works here, he said. I know I spent a lot of what I had. You did, she said. I'm not asking you to forget it. He paused. I'm asking if there's a version of this, of us, of the three of us, that I haven't completely closed the door on. Suyun was quiet for a moment. Outside, through the restaurant window, Seoul moved in its perpetual way, loud, luminous, entirely indifferent to the small human reckonings happening inside its restaurants. The door isn't closed, she said finally. But Minjun, I need you to understand something. He waited. I didn't come back for you, she said. I came for him. Everything else, she met his eyes, has to be earned. Slowly. Honestly. Without the suit as armor. He nodded. No argument. No negotiation. Jaiwoo returned, slid back into his seat, and immediately resumed his Mosasaurus monologue as though no significant thing had happened in his absence. Perhaps, Suyun thought, watching her son's animated face, nothing had. Or perhaps everything had. If you've read this far, you already know whose side you're on. If you believe every child deserves to feel safe, seen, and chosen, comment, Jaiwoo deserved better, below. And if you can't stand people like Yuna who weaponize silence against children, hit subscribe, because only people who think what she did was acceptable won't. Share this with someone who needs to hear that foolish men can learn, but only when the right people stop carrying the weight for them.